Hello and welcome to the Great Free-to-Play Update video. Before we get started, I would like to inform you that down below in the description there will be a link to an Imager album that will allow you to read through the update and the suggestions in picture format, so that if you would rather take that avenue about going through the update, you can do that rather than having my voice talk over it in this video here. So without further ado, let's get right into the update on the first slide. Right, so first things first, I want to preface all of the suggestions about the update in this slide right here. I want to talk about what this is about, what this is not about, and my mission statement for the entire project as a whole. So this is about being consistent in free-to-play, making it so that everything makes sense and there is a logical progression of equipment and balancing of the combat triangle in free-to-play. What this is not about is just giving content to free-to-play in order to give them content. Everything that I'm going to be suggesting has a reason behind it, and I'm going to be going through them in depth as we go through those updates, and at no point is anything ever going to be suggested that is better in free-to-play or even exclusive to free-to-play, as you do not want to have anything that makes it so that being a free-to-play account is objectively better than having a pay-to-play account. So, word for word, my mission statement is to create an overall better environment that makes more logical sense to new players and allows them to dabble into the game in a more inviting and less frustrating way. To promote the entire members game with features that are consistent up until a restricted point, so that players can experience a simplistic version of everything that is to come in the members game, of course. So with that side, we'll go on to the next one. So the first thing I want to talk about is combat items. What items need to be made free to play, as well as what items need to be introduced in order to complete the sets of armor as well as weapons that each of those tiers hold. So in free to play, it's a very simplistic 1, 10, 20, etc. up until 50, at which point the content then becomes restricted tier system. And so at each of these tiers there should be an armor set that consists of the helm, the body, the legs, the boots, the gloves, and the shield, as well as 3 weapon types, being the one-handed, two-handed, as well as dual-wielding variants. And of those weapon types, there needs to be at least one option for each of the attacking types, those being stab, crush, and slash for melee, arrows, bolts, and thrown for range, as well as air, water, earth, and fire for magic. So with that in mind, we'll see what items need to be made free to play and introduced in the following slides. So melee weapons and armor are both almost perfectly done already. There are only 2 things that we need to change, and the first one being a very simple boot drop on free-to-play monster drop tables. Currently, we can obtain everything in terms of the armor except for the boots in free-to-play. So by putting the boots on free-to-play monsters and allowing them to drop it, all free-to-play armors are able to be obtained in free-to-play as well. We also have an extra tier 25 black armor in there, but it's better to have more options than fewer. The other thing that we have to do for the weapons is allow the offhand variants to also be free to play. Now, the JMods already said that this is on the to-do list, so that's very reassuring to hear, and with those few slight changes, free-to-play melee will be perfectly good, perfectly balanced, and make a whole bunch of sense to any new players coming in. So, great job on melee. Let's move on to the next category. With range, we're going to be breaking it down into 2 categories. We're going to split up the armor as well as the weapons in the next slide. With the armor, it's pretty well done. There needs to be a few more changes than melee, but it's not too bad at this point in time. Very simply, we just need to put a coif and chaps for the hard leather. We need to make steel studs free to play so that we can make the studded armor. We need to allow cockroaches to drop the carapace so that free to play is able to create those armors, as well as implementing a shield at tier 30 for carapace armor. And then with the dragon hides, the green dragon hides are already currently available in Oziak's shop as well as the Champions Guild. However, we need to also put blue dragon hide in those shops, as well as add the coif and implement some boots so that those sets can be fully complete. Currently, they don't have boots at all, and the coifs are unavailable for free-to-play players through means other than buying it in the Grand Exchange. So overall, pretty decent job on range armor, but there's a few things that need to be changed. So when we get into ranged weaponry is when it gets a little bit not so good. So the two-handed arrows are all actually pretty well done. The only things there that we need to change is adding a U short and shield bow as well as a magic short and shield bow to an archery store so that it's able to actually be obtained within free to play. So the main problem here is that fletching, which is the skill that basically funds the entirety of range, is pay to play. And so without making an entire skill free to play, obviously, what we need to do is we need to implement the rest of these things, that including darts, knives, crossbows, their offhand crossbows, as well as the two-handed crossbows, into free to play. And all we have to do in order for that to happen is implement them the same exact way that we implement bows and arrows in free to play. At the archery store, you can buy the arrows that you need as well as the bows that you need, and simply adding the crossbows, the darts, the knives, etc. to those stores would allow them to be able to be obtained in free to play and used in free to play. This wouldn't be increasing the DPS or anything like that throughout ranged weaponry. It would simply give us more options and a better variety throughout the entire range skill. So quite a few things need to be changed here, but we're getting there. There's a few things, a lot of things to do, but it's not absolutely horrible. So when we get into magic armor, it's again pretty well done. There's a few things that need to be changed. Wizards need to have a shield slot in the set. The Spider Silk also needs to have a shield slot. And then Batwing needs to be made an obtainable item within free-to-play. So Bat's actually dropping Batwing. And then I'll get to Splitbark in just a second. Mystic is completely well done, perfect, and the only thing that needs to be changed is that it's sold at the Wizard's Tower rather than the Magic Guild. Now this is already on the to-do list, and so that's perfectly all well and good. As soon as that update comes, that's going to be great. So with Splitbark, that needs to be made free to play, and as well as some way of purchasing it or obtaining it within free to play. Now, if there is a huge backlash against making Splitbark free to play, I have a better suggestion, a much better suggestion later on. It would be slightly more complex to do, but it would make much more sense in the other updates that I have coming in this slide. So bear with me if you don't want to make Splitbark free to play, and we'll get into that just a little bit later. Now let's go on to magic weaponry. Now into magic weaponry, it kind of falls apart again. So the thing is, with one-handed, it's almost actually all perfect. Everything has a single hand and an offhand variant. The only thing that needs to be changed there is, again, that Batwing and Mystic are both able to be obtained in free-to-play. But then when we get into two-handed weaponry, it's very different. And it has such a simple solution that it's sort of surprising that it hasn't been implemented yet. At level 1, it's perfectly well. We have elemental staves and you're able to use those, but at level 10, tier 10, as well as tier 20, even for pay-to-play, there's not a single staff at those levels. And so, in order to balance not only free-to-play, but also pay-to-play at this point, all we need to do is simply create a staff that goes with the current sets, that being Imp, Spider, Bat, Split Bark, as well as Mystic. And when I say Mystic, I'm not talking about the Mystic staffs that are in-game, like the Mystic Air staff. I'm talking about creating an actual staff made of the same material that Mystic is, that's also able to be purchasable. So, in terms of magic weaponry overall, it has a very, very simple fix, and putting in that fix will balance not only free-to-play, but also low-level pay-to-play as well. So the next section that we're going to be looking at is abilities. And what is just fundamentally bad about the abilities in free-to-play is that no matter how you organize them or put them on your ability bar, if you're on Revolution and you aren't actively interrupting it with something like Freedom that doesn't actually output any DPS or anything like that, you can't continually fire off abilities in either magic or range. You can with melee, but by making it so that you're not even able to do a continuous ability rotation basically forces people to want to play on Legacy because they aren't even able to do any sort of customization with their EOC because they don't have a choice as to what abilities and what order they put those abilities in. So what needs to happen is a few more abilities become free to play so that we are able to have better ability rotation as well as better customization for whatever particular task it is that you are doing. The first part is obviously going to be melee abilities. And like I said, you're able to have a bit of customization, and whatever you want to do is able to have a full ability rotation with melee in free-to-play. So it's not bad at this point in time, but with the knowledge that dual wielding is becoming free-to-play, we should also look at actually differentiating between the types of attack styles. And so with that, Havoc, Flurry, and Quake should all become free to play. Havoc because it will give dual wielding a countermeasure to Smash and Cleave, which are already free to play, but make it so that it's exclusive to dual wielding alone. And then that same idea carries on to Flurry and Quake. It gives both types of attack styles their own threshold, which will be better or worse in some cases depending on what scenario you're actually going into. With those three abilities, it would allow for better customization and a actual differentiation between dual wielding and two-handed combat. Now with range, Mage is basically the same exact sort of situation. Like I said before, you can't have an ability rotation without actively interrupting it. So the three range abilities that should become free to play are Snipe, Needle Strike, and Rapid Fire. Snipe would allow two hands to have a full ability rotation. It would allow it so that you don't have to consistently interrupt that rotation or wait for cooldown or anything like that. And then having Needle Strike would also allow for full ability rotation, but for dual wielding, because by having dual wielding you aren't able to do Dazing Shot. And so currently, if you were to be able to do dual wielding range in free to play, you would not only have a bad ability rotation, but one of the abilities you couldn't even use, so it would be even worse. And so by adding those two, it would give much better ability rotation, and then by adding rapid fire, it would allow for another threshold to be free to play for range and give better customization to your ability bar. So very much like the ranged abilities, the magic abilities are no better whatsoever. The three that should become free to play are Dragon Breath, Concentrated Blast, and Wild Magic. And the reasoning is the exact same thing as the ones from range, as all of these are basically the exact equivalents of the ranged versions. So Dragon Breath, again, is meant so that two-handed weapons can have a full ability rotation. Concentrated Blast is meant so that dual wielding can have a full ability rotation, and then Wild Magic is there so that you can customize your action bar much more so than without it. So this slide goes much more so with the next topic that I'm going to bring up, and it's all about the other abilities, the defensive abilities that are much more geared towards actually tanking. And the thing is, we have three abilities that aren't even obtainable in free-to-play anymore. You could only get them from the Tuska event, so those absolutely need to be made obtainable in some fashion after the event. But the four main ones that I want to talk about adding to free-to-play are Provoke, Resonance, Reflect, and Debilitate. So Provoke absolutely needs to be free to play if we're going to be adding any sort of bossing or group PVM mechanics like the JMods have already stated that they want to do. It needs to be in there so that we can have that tank role. And then Resonance, Reflect, and Debilitate are all things that help the tank itself. So with these three abilities, as well as what is already currently free to play, by adding these ones, it allows for whoever wants to tank the ability to provoke the enemy, as well as actually go about consistently being in some sort of buff or debuff to the enemy, or something along the lines wherein they're consistently adding and removing ailments and statuses so that they're able to get used to how it is in pay-to-play, wherein at higher levels you end up having 20 plus different statuses on you at any given point in time. So transitioning into the next topic is Dungeoneering, and for the most part it's pretty short, sweet, and simple. It's been basically stated and suggested many times, just be consistent and make it all tier 50. Just like at every other given point in free-to-play, we go up to tier 50 before being restricted. Make Dungeoneering tier 50 before you become restricted. Now, two small little side notes on this is with the catalytic equipment. That needs to also become tier 50, because by leaving it at tier 40, it would make it so that it's completely useless in terms of the damage that it's able to do in comparison to tier 50, and then it would also take away the runes that it holds by holding actual elemental runes, so it contains all four different types, and by allowing tier 50, it would then be an actual downgrade to the catalytic staff, which is not what we want. Just make it tier 50 damage and accuracy, and then you're perfectly good with the catalytic equipment. And then also you need to make it so that it doesn't require Spine Beam, because that's tier 40 to make. It requires, Duskweed and Bova Strangler, so that it's in line with the other tier 50 equipment. Anyway, the next one is the viability of range. And all we need to do in order to make range a viable option in Dungeoneering is simply make it so that rather than having an ammo bind, you have a rune and an arrow bind. This doesn't make it overpowered or anything like that, because no matter what you're currently using, if you're currently using Mage, you already have bound runes to you, and if you're using range, you already have bound arrows to you. So by adding the opposite one, we're able to actually make it so that whoever wants to be one of those types, it makes it a much more viable option, especially free-to-play range, because you're not able to actually make those arrows within the dungeon. So unless you have them bound at the very start and you've gotten them as a drop, it's a very, very unviable option. So just by adding the two, instead of ammo binds, make it a rune bind and an arrow bind, becomes perfectly well, and the entirety of Dungeoneering with those three quick fixes is completely balanced and consistent with the rest of the free-to-play world. The next section is dealing with monsters, specifically bosses, and making it so that free-to-play players are able to have just a small little taste of what bossing has become in pay-to-play. For anyone who is unaware of the pay-to-play game, there's been a whole bunch of bosses that came out, and PVM is one of the biggest draws to the game. But for anyone who's free-to-play, they don't have anything to even just get a little taste of what's to come. So what needs to happen is have just a small little dabble in there so that they can get excited and want to continue bossing through other bosses, by going pay to play. Now, the JMods have already stated that they wanted to do this multiple times, specifically with the two monsters that I'm going to be bringing up here. So, the first one is the giant mole. And with the giant mole, it's actually pretty easy to implement into free-to-play. Basically, all we really need to do is change out a few things on the drop table. The one thing that I would suggest be different, though, is with the numbing roots, just simply making those free-to-play would allow people to get used to the buffing and debuffing, like I had previously stated in members, where you're eventually going to be having 20 or so different buffs and debuffs on you at any given point in time. So by allowing the numbing root to become free to play, it allows people to get used to that consistent on and off of those buffs and constantly be wary of those things. So in terms of the drop table, we only have to change a very few things. Just make the red dragon hide drop a hard leather drop. The blood runes go to death runes. Dragon 2-hand goes to rune 2-hand. Raynars go to Guams, and then Irits go to Marintil. So it's very simple. Whenever you hit that particular drop, if you're in a free-to-play world, instead of dropping red dragon hide, it just drops hard leather instead. Pretty simple. And then the one thing that we have to think about that's a little bit more difficult to implement is the mole claws and mole skins. And so the thing is, currently they're all centered around farming and herblore. Now these two skills are both pay-to-play skills, so obviously we aren't going to just be like, well, we'll give them the pay-to-play skills, and we're also not going to make it so that claws and skins are completely 100% useless in free-to-play either. So one of two things can be added, and the second one is slightly more complex but a much better solution. First things first, we could just simply make it so that Wyson or some other NPC accepts these items and gives just a different object in return rather than the bird's nest. For example, maybe he gives you some bones or some crafting supplies or a few gems, whatever it may be. But the much better, slightly more complex implementation would be to create a new magic armor and weapon set that is moleskin. So currently the only tier 40 armor for magic is split bark without the variations. The only magic armor that would become free to play, let's say at tier 40 magic, is split bark. And so what we can do is, instead of making split bark free to play, create this new armor and weapon set called Moleskin and make the Moleskin free to play and allow you to use these moleskins and these mole claws to craft that armor. You can tan it just like any other given armor, and so therefore, rather than making Splitbark free to play, we make a whole new armor set that's specific to this giant mole and gives free to play players an even bigger incentive to go and hunt that boss. The next monster is the KBD. Now, the KBD is the very first boss that RuneScape really ever had, and so it's a prime example as to what we should put into free-to-play. Now, it's slightly more complex than making the mole free-to-play because it has the poison and the dragon fire, or dragon breath, whatever you want to call it, aspects to it. And so we need some sort of way to mitigate these. Now, the anti-dragon shields are already free to play. So even though you don't have 100% protection by using something like super anti-fires in free to play, you have enough protection that we don't need to make more potions free to play for anti-fire. However, for anti-poison, we do. So the only potion that we need to make free to play is the just regular simple anti-poison. And the thing with implementing that is there's a perfect way at which we can go about doing it. The thing is, Marintils are already free to play. And so unicorns are also already free to play. The only thing is, unicorns don't drop unicorn horns in free to play. So all we need to do is make it so that unicorns can drop those unicorn horns, and then again, Marintils are already free to play, and so make it so that we can take those ingredients, as well as the vial of water that you need for the potion, to the apothecary in Varrock, and have him make those anti-poison potions for you. So you give him these 3 ingredients, and then he gives you an anti-poison potion, and so boom, that means anti-poison potions are available in free-to-play, you can obtain them in free-to-play, and you can go ahead and go hunt the KBD in free-to-play if you wish to do so. And with the drop table, again, it's pretty simple. We just need to change blood runes to death runes, magic to U-logs, so it has rune bolts on it, but we should also just allow the rune bolts to drop in free-to-play, because, like I stated before, rune crossbows should be coming to free-to-play as well, as they are tier 50 range weapons. Then, with the helm, just make it a rune helm rather than dragon, and then with the tertiary drops and those ornament kits, just don't have it actually replace anything. For example, the pets or the dragonkin books or anything like that, there's no free-to-play equivalent for those, so there's no reason to make a stand-in free-to-play drop. However, one thing that is very important is that concept of this very rare item that you're actually hunting for. You're not going to be getting it every time. It's an extremely rare drop that you really want to get, and that hunt is what drives people to PVM. It's exciting every single kill. Am I going to get the drop or not? And so, rather than having the Visage become free to play, because obviously we don't want to have DFSs come into free to play all of a sudden, all we have to do is replace that Visage drop with a 450k cash stack. Now, the 450k cash stack is just the high alch value of the Visage, so it's not like extra gold is being generated here or anything like that, and it allows people to hunt for that very rare drop. And 450k might not be a lot to many pay-to-play players, but in free-to-play it can do quite a bit more. And so it's definitely going to be a sought-after drop, and people are going to look forward to getting that drop just like they would look forward to getting that Visage drop if they were to be in pay-to-play. Then the other 2 drops that we have to look at is the Dragon Bones and the Black Leather. So The thing is, obviously we don't want to make Dragon Bones become free to play and speed it up, speed Prayer XP up, 5 times over, and then make Dragonhide free to play and speed up crafting a whole bunch of times over or anything like that. So what we can do to simply make an equivalent exchange between the two is, rather than dropping Dragon Bones, it just drops 5 big bones. And then rather than dropping a single black dragon hide, it just drops 3 hard leather, or 3 cowhide if you want to keep it cowhide so that you have to actually go ahead and then tan it yourself, just like you have to tan the black dragon hide that it drops normally. So that's KBD, and then we'll get on to the next slide right after this. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me through this video. I know it's been a long one, but I really appreciate you and your time. I have 3 links on the screen here, one to the Imager album, one to the Reddit post, and then one to the RuneScape homepage. I would be making a RuneLab suggestion here, but they do not allow free-to-play accounts to post into RuneLabs. So that's unfortunate, but there's still the link there if you would like to go and visit. Again, thank you so much, and if you have any feedback or criticisms, I would love for you guys to post that down in the comments. And if you guys think I had any good ideas, maybe give the video a like, possibly share this with some JMods, some player mods, however you guys want to do it. If you think it's a good idea, share it around. If you think it's a bad idea, please tell me why you think it's a bad idea, and I'll see what I can adjust and see what I can come up with that would be a better implementation of these ideas for free to play. Again, thank you so much, and I'll catch you in the next one.